right, so welcome to the Deep Life, Jesse.
Thanks for having me, all. It's good to finally get to connect. I left you hanging for a minute, but
Yeah.
I'm excited to talk all things wellness with you.
Yeah,
That's what we like. Good things take time, right?
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So excited. I feel like there's so much I want to talk to you about, but why don't we get started with, you could just share a little bit of your background and how you got into training, and then we'll get started from there.
Yeah. So my background, I was a firefighter for 17 years. And right away, I got into the fire service. And as a young firefighter, I was going, well, wellness means I got to be able to perform this job. And so, I just kind of dove into all things training. And I already had a background, kind of like a growing up. My dad was military, so everything was always about a workout. And then in the fire service, I just started taking different courses because I was curious on how I could optimize myself for the job. And then slowly I found I had stepped into, I got brought into a role in the fire service of helping with the wellness program for firefighters as a whole. And so I was a big part of that. So that just meant I was working PT with recruits, doing wellness assessments every year. And one day I got injured and I found foundation training, and that became a new path for me. So I went from a heavy focus on strength and conditioning and optimizing the body for the truly unknown. Like, I know it was a big thing in CrossFit, and I thought they were on a good path, or they kind of are, but that unknown and unknowable. So it was always a gauging of how are we performing in set environments where we're going to carry heavy stuff. We're going to have a lot of adrenaline, a lot of unknown conditioning workouts, which was, fire calls and gear calls and extrications. And then, got injured, and it turned into corrective exercise. And I just had I found foundation training and was trying to figure out why it was so challenging, but I wasn't doing anything but my own body weight. And it just evolved everything. It changed everything. And I got obsessed with that and left the fire service and have become kind of like this blend of strength and conditioning with corrective exercise, and get to work closely with a lot of really, really talented doctors that have helped me expand my view on wellness.
Oh, that's really cool. I feel like it just aligns very much with like the deep life, where you're in, firefighting, but you're asking the deeper questions and looking for the why, and kind of figuring out how things work and how the body works and how you can optimize it. That's really what I like so much about foundation training too, is like there's working the breathing in, working the movement, and it's more, I feel like, at least from the outside perspective looking in, there's a heavy emphasis on like longevity and being able to use your body for longer, and not necessarily, like you mentioned, like with like CrossFit and like other like intense workouts where you're beating yourself up and you're getting results, but also, at the detriment to maybe future performance and future success.
Yeah. And it's, and I always go back to, because I get the question even now, like, what is your take on CrossFit? And I tell everybody is, if your goal is to be in the sport of CrossFit, I do it. Like, go for it. I'm going to encourage you to be on the wellness path. But to your point, I'm almost 40, and I go in the mindset, and this was probably since that one injury of, what is the long-term game? What am I doing all this wellness for? And it's not just about supporting my surfing or jujitsu. I've always kind of had this mindset of, I want whatever my gym time is to support what I'm doing with the majority of my life. And I want to feel well, and I want to have fun. And I don't want to question if I can do something because, well, I haven't been taking care of myself. And so foundation training allowed me to get around chiropractors, physios, surgeons, all walks of life that have kind of come through our course to bring into theirs, getting to work with people that are seeing the injuries day in and day out, and shadowing them and being around them, and just getting those, be able to extract different perspectives. It did start to be of like, what is sustainable for the long term, and what's the goal behind it all. I saw the guy doing 100 pull-ups that was on I think it's Rich Roll's podcast, and he's over 100, and I'm going, that's my goal. I want to be able to always get to 100 and be able to walk up to a pull-up bar and do pull-ups, and go for a 5-mile run and do my push-ups, but just enjoy being active. And I think that we've lost this idea the gym is meant to kind of fill the void of what we're not getting in nature anymore. So, molding that is the challenge, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think so much of our lives, we separate different things. It's like, this is my job. This is what I do at the gym. This is how I walk around and how I live my life. And it's crazy to me if the gym isn't, like you're saying, like supporting all those other things and helping you be better at your job, helping you be better at your life, helping you feel better, then what's the point? You're just wasting an hour a day.
Exactly. It should, yeah. It should be like what Arnold used to say. I go in there and I'm smiling. Like, find what makes you smile in your training, right? And you know, to your point, like that isolation of everything is what I found is what's so cool with foundation training. Is it's more about, the whole thing is about connecting your body. And when you mention the breath, we work really hard to help people over time be able to find a connection of as many muscles as possible through these isometric position, you know, a lot of isometric, a lot of eccentric loading, but connecting as many muscles as we can. And then essentially think about the idea of you're tensioning your limbs towards center and you're using the breath to push away from center. And what Doc Goodman dives into is that it trains this tug of war with the body that is allowing it to balance back to this, trying to think of the right word. I don't want to say homeostasis, compared to a lot of people like what does that even mean? But just a balanced alignment of your body to then load it in the gym, load it in life in whatever manner. But everyone I see in foundation, they do this workout that is in the moment grueling, but when they're done, they're smiling and they feel really, really, really good.
Yes.
Actually, I want to have you get into sort of what is foundation training. But I'll say real quick, like we stumbled on it years ago.
Yeah, at least
we found,
five
there was that like that viral video, like the 12-minute foundation training workout. And we did that every day for a while.
Legit one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. And all I'm doing is like isometric holds and moves, but it's fabulous.
Yeah, it's like the more you do it, the harder it gets, because you're able to create more tension and push harder and harder. But then exactly what you're saying, it's like this miserable 12 minutes and then you stand up and it's like, wow, I feel incredible.
Yeah. I mean, Dan, that's the best way to put it is grueling, and at least like you're spot on. It's so I still do it now. That 12-minute one, I'll go back to it when I'm on the road and, you know, or like I don't have the ability to go on our streaming site, but I'll do it on the road. And sometimes I'll put on blood flow restriction bands if I'm not able to get in a gym for that little extra stimulus. And I ripped them off at 10 minutes in because I'm going, this was a bad idea. You know? But I make my parents do it. And, you know, you're both in great shape. You're both very strong athletes. It's a challenge for you. But then I'll have my parents do it with me. And my dad's 75 and it's great for him. And I look at that's the rub of, it's not meant to take the place of, you know, I find a lot of coaches and athletes, they look at it as like, well, so what, I'm only supposed to do this now? Like, no. It's meant to be, we tell everybody in our course, it's your universal accessory. Let it enhance everything else you do. If you're injured, do that until you feel better, you know, add other things from your physio or whoever, but do these workouts. And then if you're feeling good, do it as a warm up. Do it on a day where you're like, oh, I want to do something or I don't have a lot of time, but let it be plugged in.
That's perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So can you dive into just a little bit? We did have someone, I don't know if you know him, Shane Cuppett.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So we had him on the podcast. God, it's been a while. So our listeners are definitely familiar with the foundation training style, but if you could just dive into kind of what it means and what it entails and how it is beneficial for kind of our body.
Yeah, so because it's a continuous evolution. That's what I say everywhere. So like, it's awesome if they listen to Shane, but it's continued to evolve since he was kind of even in the fold with us. Yeah. But so it's a series of corrective exercises, and they were all developed from a guy named Dr. Eric Goodman. He developed them to address the fact that they wanted to do surgery on his back, and he was trying to figure out what would get him out of pain. And so as he slowly experimented and started finding what was helping, he put his education behind these positions, and slowly foundation training was spawned about probably 13, 14 years ago now. But that's what I look at when I tell people what it is you're learning to realign your own body. You're learning how to optimize your own body with your body. And it can be used in two formats. It can be used clinical in that chiropractic physio setting. You know, when I work with somebody in pain, I'm very specific to their body. I mold the work to their body. But it can also be used for sports performance and enhancement. And that's what I just got done doing, was working with a set of twin brothers going into the world's biggest jiu-jitsu tournaments. One got gold, one got bronze. And we're just it was awesome, but it was also one of those things I look at it and go, from the athlete perspective, we're teaching you how to really turn up that communication, the muscle fibers, but it's more about recruiting. The more we're in these positions, we're doing these isometrics, we're learning how to turn up that ability to recruit more muscle fiber behind every effort. And then, you know, it becomes that, like I said, universal accessory. So if you're injured, it's amazing. If you're I've got a lot of chiropractors that I go into their offices and they do all their stuff. And they're like, okay, Jesse, he's got these things going on. You know, I'd love for you to kind of put him through a couple FT exercises that can help really stabilize and support what I just did. And so I'll go at it in their clinics like that, or they just refer them to me. And then in the training standpoint, you know, I'll go in and I'll watch people train. Okay, what are the nagging injuries? What are the breakdowns? Let me apply the method. Let's get those balanced out. We'll add the right strength stuff to it. And then we'll make our game plan for really enhancing their strength practice. And what I find is most have a disconnect of that ground to top, right? And I know you guys are training in the fashions I look at and go, okay, this is not anything foreign to them, but there's a disconnect in the body. And so for me, it's closing the fundamental gaps of strength training, but using foundation to make sure we're always aligned, primed, and coming at the training with a balanced body, not a body that's kind of been sitting in a chair all day and now we're going to load it. Mm-hmm. Right. So prep it, be quick and go. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Good. I'll go on tangents. I'm always like, did I?
No, that's perfect. Yeah. The more you want to talk, the better.
Yeah.
I think people are probably sick of listening to us. So this is perfect.
No, be careful what you wish for.
But yeah, I love what you said about like, there's a lot of people have such a disconnect throughout their body of just feeling and understanding what's going on in their body. And then also, you know, that connection, like from the ground up and feeling what your feet are doing and having that work with your core and your back and your shoulders. And I think that really resonates for me, even as like an athlete. I played college football. And I think that like just sort of over time, I lost a lot of that connection to my body. And whether it was just wearing shoes and taping my ankles too much and all these little things where I wasn't thinking about feeling my feet and feeling the ground. And then, like I was saying, as you started getting into like experimenting with some of the concepts from foundation training and thinking about movement differently, that sort of connection and understanding of my body has made such a difference in everything I do training wise. And I think it's such a useful tool and skill.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, I wouldn't even say it was the football and the loading. Is I think most of us are raised in especially as we get into wellness, it's primarily about producing force, moving weight, getting strong, and building. And so much of foundation training is really teaching you how to optimize absorbing force. And so, you know, if we can better absorb force, we can better produce force. And then if we can recruit and really bring in all these muscle chains where we're essentially aligning our body and our posture and our position to ask the major moving muscles of the body to bear the load first, because that's a big part of it, is that you start to train, and as you go further into it, you start to kind of have you're consciously teaching the body so that subconsciously your hips load first, that the posterior chain, the backside of our body, does the majority of absorbing. That we do it enough, we're not walking with the toes splayed out, the inner thighs leading, but our toes leading forward. And we go from the shoulders wanting around, the head track forward, to we're open. And the more we do it, these connections start to happen. And, you know, I go back to before that, there wasn't a lot outside the surf community, for me anyway. There wasn't a big promotion on being barefoot, on walking around. I'd read the books on earthing and all that stuff, and it made sense. But where we're really training, and, you know, I'm like, okay, let's get after it. But wait a minute, we're going to focus on 3 points of contact on our feet. I got to spread my toes. Oh, wait a minute, I got to work. I got to stand up tall. And with that connection point, it really does. What I've noticed is a different response from everybody. My intense athletes, first responders, there's an agitation to being asked to slow down and connect. And then my other people that are kind of the different environments I've seen, it'll be very overwhelming for them. They'll get frustrated. And so I have to communicate now that, hey, this is just a aha moment. Look at it as, wow, this is interesting, because I'm going to ask you to coordinate a lot of points in your body that might be foreign. But not only am I going to ask you to coordinate them, but I'm going to ask you to coordinate them and then get them all to work together and you're going to do your best to maintain all these connections in every exercise. Then I'm going to ask you to breathe in a very specific way. And at the start, for people, it can just be too much. Or the best is when they laugh. They're like, oh shit, oh my legs, oh I forgot about the fingertips, oh the breath, oh my head. And they laugh because and just to breathe. But when they start to laugh, there's another thing that happens, is that it actually, if you listen to Huberman Lab, what's great is that you get out of your own way of learning, and it actually allows you to start to pick up the pattern quicker. But those connections are fundamental to foundation training. And for everybody, it's like, the best example I give is, hey, we're going to focus on the 3 points of contact on your feet, and you're going to add an inner anchor. So can we keep those 3 points pat at the base of the big toe, pinky toe, and heel, and with a little degree of internal rotation, have this tensioning towards center with the legs? It's going to give you a active engagement you will feel if you're doing right up the inner thighs, connecting to your pelvis. Then we're going to hinge and load your hips back. Are you maintaining that anchor? As the hips hinge back, do you feel the back of your legs tension, or are you bowing out and over your toes, not loading the hamstrings? A lot of people will communicate that as if they've had a low back injury, they'll feel it right in the low back as opposed to the muscles on the low back. But hey, we're connecting and coordinating all that. When you bring the hands up and make that sphere of tension, did you bring it up from under the arms, your lats, or did you use the traps and raise them and feed into more internal rotation with your head going forward, kind of pinching up and into the neck? Usually that's communicated as neck crap. It doesn't feel so great. But if you're able to do all that and you can keep it all together and you've been practicing, then you bring the breath in, it starts to become this really challenging thing that people start shaking. They start having this funny look. They're feeling their low backs, which if we hear it right, it's always going to be this both sides of the low back, active engagement. We're asking the lumbar spine muscles, we're asking those muscles to do their job and support while we load the hips, while we move the arms. And if you're familiar with the bird dog, to me, it's a great precursor to thread with the bird dog, because both of them are asking for the same thing: mobile hips, mobile shoulders with a stable torso, and that we can move around it. I like the founder because at the end of the day, it's setting the pattern that you load your hips through the day. It's setting the pattern that you can do it anytime, anywhere. We don't have to get on all fours, but I will absolutely use that bird dog with people that are just not making a connection, or, oh, we got to really regress. But I haven't found too many people. I can't just be like, let's get into a founder and see how you're moving. Oh, hey, you have a tendency to want to load your knees. Let's get into those hips. So it's a fun play, and just pointing things out for people. It becomes hopefully a game, not a like, oh no, another thing I'm failing at.
Right. Yeah. And I think that, like you were saying before, like that connection and kind of figuring out how to hinge your hips and kind of load the posterior chain is so important, because in a culture where we're like constantly sitting down and constantly hunched forward, like so many people just aren't using their glutes at all, aren't using their hips properly. And that's why you see so much like low back pain and so much hip and knee pain, and people are just miserable. You did touch on there getting the breath involved, and I would love it if you go a little bit deeper on sort of what the role of breath plays in foundation training and in life.
Yeah. So this has become a favorite of mine, because I've been brought in to do breathing things. I'm like, I'm not a breath work guy, but I guess I do teach a form of breathing. So here we go. So what I tell for everybody is, look at it as like, let's first talk on your posture. Okay. The good thing with decompression breathing is that it's a very quick, when done right, retraining for your posture. If you look at Dr. Goodman's book, it's a retraining of the axial skeleton towards expansion. Now, I like to communicate this in fireman terms. What does that even mean? It means we're going to retrain your body to go from either wanting to collapse in. If we see that classic poor posture, my shoulders are rounded, I'm converging in towards center, we're going to retrain it so that you're open and up, and the head is actually lengthening to where we're using the major support muscles of your neck, the sternocleidomastoids, rather than collapsing in on the little back, all the little muscles on the back side of your neck and converging. My surfers is the other one I like to give the example. They want to go into this hyperextension position and they want to collapse the other way. So both of those are compression on the spine. And they, over time, like I've got the surfer who most people think, well, I want to walk around like him, not converging in. Well, that guy's in back pain. And then I've got the one going the other way where she's collapsing in and she's in pain. And so what decompression breathing allows us to do is train the upper body to start to expand and be open. So I always tell people is think about right away, we tap our clavicle bones and we think about clavicles are high. And then for simplicity, lift the weight of your head off your neck. So we've set the stage to allow the rib cage to start to move because our lungs are in our rib cage. And then we get into fundamental decompression breathing. So if you're listening to this, just tap your clavicle bones. Those two little guys that are broken often if you play football, very common one. But tap those clavicle bones and just think about those are your high point. And then while you're listening to me with the clavicle points high, try to think about just tap the center of your head for a moment, and that's reaching to the sky. And do your best to stay here while I explain the rest of this. And you can breathe with me if you want to. But when we get into decompression breathing, we set the stage of the chest is up, the back of the neck is long, very specific to the anatomy. But then when we breathe, we're focusing on a 360-degree rib cage expansion. So we want to breathe into the rib cage. I guide the backside, the sides, and then the front lastly, very specific reasons. But then that when we exhale, we're able to maintain an expansive rib cage and draw the stomach in, lengthening the abdominal out. So we're actively engaging a deep layer abdominal muscle called your transversus abdominis. And we're using that, I like to think in, again, fireman terms, almost like a capture. I expand the rib cage up and away from center, 360 degrees. I lengthen and engage my abdominal. I draw it in and lengthen, and I capture my progress. I expand even bigger. I capture my progress to a point where 3 or 4 inhalations, it starts to be like, oh, I can't really, I'm restricted, or I hear that often. It's like, I can't get any more breath, but they're still breathing. And what I explain to them is like, no, we're doing it right. We're getting these muscles lengthened under tension around your rib cage. And then we're asking them to maintain the expansion as we engage the abdominal, we push the air out, and then the lungs have no choice but to deflate, but the rib cage is still big. And so it becomes this beautiful symphony of a very challenging breath. It allows our diaphragm, because it connects 360 inside the rib cage, to fully open and close. So we're in a sense toning that diaphragm. That's the muscle of breathing for our body, our life. But then when we talk about breathing, as we address compression, we're getting off of major nerves of communication, phrenic nerve. We're looking after the vagus nerve. And if you're unfamiliar, look them up. I'm not even going to try to go into all the things that they do for our body, but they're pretty important. We start to lift that rib cage up so that we're not collapsing on it and pinning down on the diaphragm. We want that to be allowed to open. As we lift up, we get off another major bundle of nerves called the solar plexus. And so I always tell people, tap your breastplate and think about, it's the same cue I'll give for the clavicles high. I'm always going to give you chest up. Cool. Some people get it. Tap the chest, bring the sternum up. If you think about it, we want to open up so that the solar plexus can get the sunlight, that we can feed the soul, if you will. I stole that from Doc Goodwin. I think it resonates, right? If we're up, we're open, our posture is good, it's going to affect the way we go into the world. And if we can learn how to breathe and start to use this, I love it for meeting stress, as opposed to like, oh, let me just close my eyes and slow my breathing down. No, let me meet the challenge. Let me get 5 really big decompression breaths, challenge myself for a moment, and then I'm going to pull the plug and go into some slower, classic belly breathing. But that decompression breath is powerful for aligning posture. It's powerful for back pain. You know, as we learn to expand the rib cage, we're lengthening and tensioning muscles along the spine. What makes it a decompression breath is we traction the pelvis with those isometrics with the legs, and then we use the breath to expand and pull the other direction. And so we're kind of getting this 2-sided pull on your low spine, and it's just kind of the old finger cuff game that we had when we were kids. We're pulling on the 2 ends of that low spine, and it's just amazing. Again, are we making space for the discs? I don't know. We haven't done an MRI, but what I do look at it as, what I explain to people is the reason it winds up taking away back pain very quickly is that we're lengthening all the tiny muscles along your spine, all these tiny muscles that connect spine to rib cage, your posterior serratus to the anterior serratus. We're challenging all them to lengthen with tension, and we're recalibrating your shock absorbers along the spine. So we're expanding everything, making them nice and primed so that your body can optimize absorbing force, feel good, breathe well, and then, hey, you're not collapsed on the diaphragm. Those neck muscles are pulling you up nice and tall. They connect to the sternum and clavicle, the back of your head at the mastoid process. That's what we're looking for when we say chest up, neck long. Everything is anatomy, very deep anatomy. Like Doc is just, he's written 3 books on all this. You know, I tell everybody, it's like, if you really want to kind of get into where this comes from, read his books. My role has been taking it, distilling it down, and communicating it so the masses like myself can go, what did he say? I hope that helps. If anything, if there's anything I can clarify, please let me know.
No, I think that was perfect. You did exactly what you said your job is. You made that very, very practical and easy to understand. I think people will really benefit from it.
Definitely.
I do want to let people know, just if you're listening to this, as Jesse's going through it, he is showing a lot of this with his body, and a lot of the cues might make more sense if you watch the YouTube videos. Just something to think about. But yeah, I'd love to actually, do you have something?
No.
I'm sorry. I'd love to take this a little bit into like the work you're doing with kind of combat athletes and like high level performers, and how this plays in. You mentioned before that like it's sort of like this is helping all the training. So let's just hear kind of a little bit of what you're doing with those guys without giving away your secrets.
No, I tell everybody now is like, you know, I'll give the ingredients, but I won't give the recipe for a specific athlete, right? You can have all the ingredients, right? So, I mean, where we're at now is you know, we've worked with the big wave world champion. You know, like if you ever listen to those guys, when they go down on a wave, it's not uncommon to have limbs ripped out of a socket, muscles ripped off bone. They are, you know, they are at nature's mercy in those waves, and it's absolutely crazy. But big wave world champion Billy Kemper, worked very closely with him and his coach. His coach came through our course. So what we do with him is not that far off what I've done with the Rotolo brothers. Cade and Ty are 19-year-old jiu-jitsu phenoms. We just went to what's called the ADCC, and Cade left the youngest world champion in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And then his brother got a bronze fighting guys in an absolute division, which means he was fighting guys, you know, 50, 60 pounds heavier than him. And if you look at some of the photos, it's crazy the size difference.
Wow.
But
that's incredible.
yeah, it was a beautiful thing to watch, because it's an arena where there is no drug testing. It's an arena where it's almost kind of like joked, and even you know, I said they almost gave steroids a pet name in there. It's called Bomba. Everyone, oh, he's on Bomba. And like, well, they downplay it, you know. And the brothers' big goal is to show the world what can be done naturally, to show the next generation what can be done naturally. And so when I work with the athletes, it's really fundamental foundation training. It's teaching them how to connect and use their muscles. Now, a lot of times we'll have days where it was just a 30-minute foundation workout. I think those are the ones that all the strength guys are the most, that's the one they fear the most. Like, just let me move weights. Let me just gut out. But when we start getting these static positions and just holding is where you really see I like to say that, oh shit face. It's like an ice bath where there's that moment of like, I got to get out of this. How much longer am I here? And you hear it all the time. But, you know, setting the stage for healthy, strong movements, setting the stage so that we're aligning the body, priming the body to have as many muscles as we can behind every effort. So Billy and the guys in the gym, it's just at this point, it's worked into their warm-ups where they'll start the day with probably 5 to 6 minutes of very specific breathing drills. I think they like to use this stuff from Laird and Gabby, the XPT breathing. But they'll do some of the breathing, and then they'll go into 10 to 15 minutes of specific foundation training. Then they'll go and do their dynamic warm-up, and then they're on to their whatever their strength training is for the day. With the brothers, getting around them, you know, it basically was we've done a couple things. They went to Singapore, crushed their opponents, and, you know, I got a message like, dude, we're so into this, because we were connected through their doctor. They were like, we want to start building a strength base. Where do we start? We don't want to throw off our jiu-jitsu game. So we see our teammates just getting huge. We don't want to do that. And so their doctor said, let me connect you with Jesse. He's got something I think you'll really like. And so we started with a couple fundamental foundation training exercises, and right away it was resonating. They just were coming out of them, and, you know, just saying like, I feel so strong. I feel so connected. Like, oh, I feel like I just got this huge boost of testosterone. I'm like, you're 19. That stuff's coursing through your veins. You're like, don't worry. But I'm like, you can cough wrong and you can have a boost of testosterone. But it resonated with them as we started to go. Once I went and watched their training, you know, I mean, these guys are they're fighting at very high levels. They're, you know, to me, it's crazy, but they're in there for an hour and a half. And we know the most likely time to get injured is when we're super fatigued. They're in full scraps, jiu-jitsu scraps. And it wasn't uncommon for them to come off the mat the first couple of days where I'm going, okay, we're going to start easing in our weights as we got to get ready for ADCC. I got to make one of you bigger, but I need to make you both stronger. There is a point we have to bring weights in. But right away I went, you're coming off the mat. He's complaining of a shoulder. You're complaining of your back just feeling torqued right now. I'm like, I can't just start loading weight on you. So it was right away, cool, we're going to use foundation training to address these. We're going to kind of spend the next day or two really 3 times a day getting the foundation. And they woke up, we did mobility, foundation training, swimming. We went to jiu-jitsu. I warmed them up. I cooled them down. Evening, foundation again, because I was going, I'm going to really dose your body to get these muscles supporting and absorbing. Because I'm going, and this is a lot of Dr. Goodman's theory, is like, you guys, what you're telling me, your back, your shoulder, you guys aren't injured, you're twisted. You're not broken. There's a twist in the body somewhere. Let's figure it out. And that's what foundation training is really good for, is undoing the twists and the kinks. So after 2-3 days, these nagging things were pretty much gone. We started warming up, and then it just became, again, the mornings didn't change. It was foundation training. Then we'd go to the gym. We'd warm up with foundation training. And they'd load. What I love with them, and I see this in the very high level guys, is they start plugging it in all day long. They start doing it in between jiu-jitsu matches. They're doing it. They're in it. The body starts to want these things when you start to realize, like, when you're out of that little bit of alignment. Oh, let me get a real quick connect here. Let me get these muscles fired up. So it starts to become just a part of their life, and that's where it integrates. And with these high level athletes, I'll say the same thing for performers. I was with, through going into the pandemic, I was with Madonna to help her stay on stage. And so again, like, not combat, but they're dancing and performing at an extremely high level. She's in her 60s, and they were at a point where she needed a hip replacement, and they were going to maybe have to end tour early. So I was brought in to see, can I get her pain relief and enough to be performing? And I was able to, which then the pandemic hit, and she was like, I can't get surgery. Will you please stay and work with me every day until I can get this surgery? And all I was doing for her was helping her manage. But again, like, the idea of, I'm going to get all the muscles around her hip supporting, so that one specific spot isn't just dumping into. And it wasn't just at the hip joint itself. Again, that TA lengthening everything so that all these muscles are like springs and cords that are holding her up off the hip. So, again, I got to mold it very specific to you. For the brothers, I'm going to mold it specific to the goal here. For the guys on the North Shore, when they have bad injuries, that's the big wave guys, we'll mold it. But otherwise, it's a general practice. And as the coach, I'm going, hey, if they're moving like crap, or they come in the gym today and they're just beat up, or maybe the waves are just on right now. I mean, they're surfing 3-4 times a day, solid waves, nothing crazy for them, but I know their output is high. We're going to back off pretty much all the lifts. I'll give them a little bit, or their coach and I, let me rephrase that. Their coach and I will work together to really let them have the satisfaction of moving some weight, but we're going to do a lot more foundation training so that we're aligning and dosing their bodies with more body weight stuff, because we've seen where it doesn't seem to really take people to that over the edge of overtraining. We don't really run into the massive micro traumas that you get with moving weights. And so it's kind of like that, you guys know, working with athletes, other people, like, especially young ones, they want to go and they want to go hard. So finding the balance to keep them engaged, hitting that, but also as the coach, calibrating so that they don't overdo it. And that's why I go, foundation is that universal accessory, because I can push them to be like, okay, I'm done, I'm going home. And they're going to wake up the next day feeling better.
Yeah, I love that. And I think I love just hearing you speak, because just like the name of our show, we always are looking for the deeper meaning of things. But what I'm hearing from you, especially your enthusiasm, it's so inspiring, but it's you're allowing these people to have their bodies, the innate intelligence of our human bodies, to optimize itself. There's a time and space for surgery when someone needs it, but you being able to identify and then helping others tap into their true potential of their body in the corrective measures is just so empowering. That's what we want to share to the world. That's it. And people like you who give everybody that chance to do it. We're human and our human bodies are so intelligent. It's just being able to tap into that. And I love that you can do that. That's incredible.
Thank you. And I will say, to the point of surgery, because I had this talk the other day, is there is a time and a place. I just always say to everybody is exhaust all your options, because even then you're going to strengthen your body going into surgery so that you get more from the surgery. But let's address the way you're moving. Let's see, can we bring stability around whatever, and I'm talking right now specific to the back, with Madonna, with the hip. I understood her why for going, I don't want to, she really wanted to avoid it, where I'm looking at it going, if there's one surgery I know people are just why did I not get it done sooner? It's hip replacement. But with the back, I had a conversation the other day with a friend of mine who's very into foundation training. He's very into holistic health, but he's hitting a point where he's just going, nothing's helping. I'm in pain. It was almost like he needed to be told that it was okay. And I just going, you're the polar opposite of the vast majority, where it's give me the quick fix. But if you don't address the breakdowns in how you're moving, then you can get, I know people that got surgery and they're still in pain, and it's we have to address it. Your body, you can't never use your body and then expect it to perform. It's that whole idea. If you don't use it, you lose it. And anytime I meet a guy in their 80s, 90s, even, I haven't had the privilege of too many guys in their hundreds, but I will listen to podcasts with them. But whenever I'm in the sauna, whenever I'm at the gym or surf trip, and I meet a guy that's in those older years, even when I was younger, I'd always ask, what's the secret? What are you doing? When I get to, when I was in my 20s, this guy was surfing in Nicaragua and he was in his 60s and he was just getting out there, so strong, such a powerful surfer. And I was like, what are you doing? And he's like, don't ever stop moving. He recommended AAKG as a supplement. And he said, it's just all about moving. And I was in our last certification we taught in Minnesota. Our whole team was in the sauna, and this guy comes in, loudmouth dude. And we're thinking, he's like, how old do you think I am? We're like, I don't know, late 60s. He's 89 years old. He just got done with this whole swim workout. He was such a boss, so much energy. And he just said, I don't take the escalator, I take the stairs. If it's less than this many floors. Yeah, he's saying you have to fight to keep what you have. And he goes, you have to show up every day and do something. And so do I think foundation training is the have all be all? No, I think that it's I call it the grenade. If I roll it in the room, I'm going to get 90 out of 100 people out of pain or at least feeling good and moving. Then I use other tools. I take courses all the time. I just went to another course, and I'm always looking at other tools. And we encourage as a team, all of our teachers to always be continuing education, take other courses, learn other tools. We are not a standalone fix. We are just a very powerful one that can enhance anything else you do. And more courses are only going to make you better. So, the whole thing I want to say with that is use your body, move, find what makes you feel well and bring it out so that, you're waking up to the day excited to get out of bed, not waking up going, oh God, is this thing hurting me? And get a team, get a good chiro, get a good physio, get a good massage therapist, get acupuncture, give your body care and attention. It's a worthy investment.
Yeah, I think that's such great advice. And I think this is something it's really cool the way that you talk about it, you're saying, it's a tool for everything. You're using it with these really high level performers, using it working with first responders, and then just people, general population who are in pain. And there's so much carryover and just sort of the same things that help each of them. We're all humans. Everything is everything. Getting out of your own way and letting your body be its best is going to help no matter what you're doing.
Yeah, that's the challenge, getting out of your own way. You know, like a lot of people, it's something new, or it's a threat instead of ooh, this might enhance my skill. Not instead I see a lot of it, and it's like the surfer that looks at the waves and goes, oh, they just see the crowd, versus the guy that looks and just sees the waves. Like the one guy sees the crowd, like, oh, it's too crowded. The other guy sees, oh, this looks so fun, right? And so I think that's a perspective of, even with developing your own skills, is some people look at it and go, oh, well, and they're threatened by it, instead of going, oh, this could be, I could get some really good takeaways to use in my game. And that's kind of my attitude for that practitioner, that coach, or even the person at home, is what takeaways can you get to just enhance your skills or the people around you.
Yeah, I think it shows in the way, like Lisa's saying, like your passion for talking about it, and the way you're able to pull everything in. It's awesome to listen to. I really appreciating this.
Thank you.
Do you want to switch gears a little bit and talk? I've seen you mention a few times on like Instagram posts, talking about like the conscious use of cannabis and using it to kind of relax and using it for health. And it's something that we run into a lot, like talking with different clients, and even like just recommending, like, you know, messing around with like smoking a little bit, or trying some edibles, or just some CBD and different things that could help people and to experiment. I think there's such a stigma and fear a lot of times that people are afraid. So I'd kind of love to hear you talk about how you use it, you know, specifically for yourself and maybe some of your clients.
Yeah. So with that in mind, I will always start by saying CBD doesn't have the psychoactive effect.
Yeah.
THC does. And so I'm gonna go very simplistic here, because this is something that you can go way down a rabbit hole now on the research. And that's what I encourage anybody that's got the stigmatism mindset, or the nope, devil's lettuce, look at the research coming out now. You know, when they went to kind of break down negatives on cannabis, they found that we have what's called an endocannabinoid system in our body, and that when we use things like marijuana, we stimulate this endocannabinoid system, and it's something that you want to be stimulating. Dr. Goodman's new book, Foundations of Health, he goes into all of this heavily. So if you're that person that's really on the fence, but you're open to maybe a different point of view, I would say read his book. But what I look at is that when I consciously go, okay, I'm going to smoke some weed, and I got a lot of buddies that laugh, because they're just going like, dude, what? You're not launching a rocket here. Just smoke with us. But for me, it's like, when I was a firefighter, I stayed away from it, you know, for a very long time. And then I got around, as I got around really high level firefighters, and we would have a Christmas party, guys would break out joints and we'd have a smoke. And it was like, man, all the highest level guys, the dudes that didn't just talk about it, but truly performed on major calls and truly did amazing things, were all the guys that would smoke. That was interesting to me. Okay. And, you know, they were my mentors. I'm going, if so-and-so wants to sit down and share a joint with me and talk about life and talk about these things, I'm going to do that. I want to learn from this guy. But fast forward, I just brought that mentality of, I know in me that when I go really hard and I'm training really hard, at the end of a training session, if I have a small amount of THC, just enough to knock me down, that it's going to allow, in my mind, it's allowing me to recover better. It's managing stress, right? Like training is stress, life is stress. And we want to try to mitigate the stress on the body so that it can recover and essentially heal and be ready to go for the next demand. And you know, when I look at it, it's one of these things of applying in a way that allows you to be in a calmer state. And, you know, now that I'm gone, I'll admit to this, towards the end of my career, when I come out to California, I might bring back some edibles to Florida. And I'd gotten into a phase where I'd get off from the firehouse and I would have a 2.5 milligram mint. And I would get to the coast to check the waves, and I would be noticing that I forgot I even took it. It wasn't a big effect, but I would just start to catch, oh yeah, I had that mint, and everything was so calm. And leaving something like the firehouse where it's very high stress, you're seeing horrific things, you're experiencing horrific moments in other people's lives, and you're supposed to walk away and act like nothing happened. And so for me, it's like, breathing practices, movement practices, get that trauma out of your body. You know, I had very specific things I do on the fire truck with breathing practices, but getting out of there and just having something, allowing your system to come down, go be in nature. And like we talked about, connect with it. And I look at it as Native Americans were onto it. Our ancestors used it, again, in a ceremonial setting, in a wellness setting, in a mind expanding setting. Somewhere along the way, as a civilized culture that we are, we deemed it to be this horrific thing. And so I'm a big believer in paying attention to your heritage and your ancestors and what past cultures did. Because as we're coming around, I think we're seeing that in wellness as a whole is, hey, a lot of modern science is pharmacology, is chemicals, and a lot of what once was health and wellness and has been part of medicine for thousands of years, Chinese medicine, is more about connecting with the earth, using herbs, using medicine. And you can see that from a lot of the leading docs that aren't mainstream, is that 80 to 90% of autonomic issues we're seeing are related to our diets, to our what we're consuming. And so it's kind of, I think when you start to look at it like that, realizing that things from the earth are not necessarily the worst things for us. Again, everything within reason. If you can't manage, if you're a person that goes, you know, I've seen it, you go brain dead smoking marijuana, it's probably not for you. And I'm an advocate for it, but again, with consciousness behind it. I've got some athletes that I had like, dude, I'm always for this, especially in between intense training. But you guys can't handle it. It needs to go, or evening time, but you guys go from being focused and driven to worthless. And so those athletes, we have that real conversation. So, you know, I like to think that I'm walking the line of what's the balance, and then, you know, like figuring out for you. There's a gentleman I know of that Dr. Goodman's friends with that had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and they used high dose THC to address this, and he's still alive, and he was in really bad shape. I believe he's I forget, I can't recall his name, but I want to say one of the colleges did research with this guy. And so what they're showing with it and what the research is, I try to empower everybody, especially if you have the mindset of avoiding it. Look at what's coming out, be open to question. Don't just go based on what you've always been told. Because my parents were anti, or my dad was anyway. My mom was a sneak off and smoke a joint hippie. My dad was very anti. My dad was a, you know, Vietnam veteran, ex-military, very, very, you know, no to marijuana. And as he's gotten older and as he's opened up to the research, he's starting to become a lot more accepting of it. And he's, I would say, very conscious, but he will use it. You know, he had been diagnosed with prostate cancer. And so we went at that very holistically, ozone therapy, sauna work, diet focus. And his doc even said, small amounts of marijuana is going to be good. Using Paul Stament's mushroom blend. There's a lot of research around mushroom. Things like melatonin done correctly. A lot of this stuff that's completely unconventional to something like cancer. And where the VA was going, oh, you have a radical cancer. You have this, you have that. Total fear mongering. We went to a doc outside the system. He was like, okay, yeah, you've got it. It's not aggressive. It's this, that, and the other. Let's go with this approach. Let's check in 6 months. You were at. Everything had been reduced. Everything had gone down as far as the severities of it. And so that's not always the case. Have a great team around you. But that was another one of a doctor supporting marijuana and what its potential is. So conscious. If you want a real guy to look at, I got to connect you guys with him. Ryan, I'm going to butcher his last name, but he's got a podcast this one time on psychedelics, and he's very, very much a marijuana guru in a way that blew my mind, really blew my mind. So I'd love to connect you guys after this. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've listened to his podcast a little bit.
Yeah.
Very
Not
interesting
just
guy.
for Sharkies, we're dying to have him on, actually.
Okay, for sure.
Yeah, because we were, and speaking for myself, I was the same way. I was petrified of marijuana. I mean, I was in the age of like, don't do drugs. Marijuana is the gateway drug. And I'm just speaking truthfully. And Dan kind of pioneered it a couple years ago. He was like, and he was doing it for all the concussions in football that he thought he had done the research on how beneficial it was. And maybe a year he had been doing it before I started, because I was just nervous. And I have high severe anxiety, and I'm a control freak. being better about it. But I've heard horror stories. So I did it slow. One day I just woke up and I was like, okay, I'm ready to try it. I like knew I was ready. And it's changed my life. Really in the most positive way. I've never, ever felt unsafe. I've never had an episode where I felt like manic or that my anxiety was heightened. Just as you described it, I forget I take it at times because it's the most relaxing, enjoyable feeling. And it calms you. The nerves and the anxiety is gone. And I highly recommend it to anyone who is ready to consciously try it.
Mhm.
That word that you use is so important. You have to go into it consciously, because having that perception as opposed to partying with it, I think is much different. And you can use it either way. Hey, you want to go to a college party or rave and enjoy it, do it. But consciously connecting to it and having the ability to help your body it's been incredible.
Yeah, it's wild. And to your point, like I went through that when I left the fire service, where I was kind of like, oh, it would almost an anxiety state. And I said for people is like, what I love to do is if I have that amount where it's too much, or I find myself going there, and sometimes I'll purposely now do that. My twin brother and I joke about is like, we're gonna, we're going on a spirit journey and you have an edible or something. But very specifically, what I found for me is like beyond any other tools is like, it's where I've had the most, like I look at it as like when it gets to that point, there's a little bit of anxiety, but I like to journal. And I like to just put down everything that comes through my head. And what I found is like, those are the times for me anyway, that I do the most honest self-evaluation. And that in a way and I can look back now at major moments and pivotal moments in my life where I had some too much and was just, going in an anxiety state, but really like an outside looking in at my behaviors, my habits, my lifestyle, and being almost hypercritical. But it allowed me to then make these shifts. And what I just started doing was I got a journal. I would write things down because I was like, I want to be able to go back and read over all of this stuff. Like what Hemingway used to say is like, we should be held accountable to things we say when we're drunk. I like to think of it as like, we should be held accountable to things we say when we're in a really great mood, or when we're actively going, okay, I want to take a look in and evaluate where I'm at in life. And I think it's so important to do and be honest with yourself. And, sometimes you don't like the view. Well, write it, what's going on, write it. I had, at the fire service, one of them was I just was focusing so much on, loss. I mean, I didn't know where it was coming from. And so I just kind of went, okay, well, you're going to meditate on dying. You're going to meditate on in that moment, and you're going to meditate on losing yourself or losing a family member. What is it that's so fearful of this natural process in life? And it allowed me to kind of clear out a lot of garbage from what I didn't realize was being held on to from 17 years of being a fireman, at a young age where you just whatever, to getting that point of seeing real people in real moments. And, even if you're the best guy being disconnected, you're still carrying things. And so it allowed me to kind of filter some of this stuff out. And I think it's just be willing to do the work, be willing to, question, like grow. If you keep doing what you've always done, you're going to keep getting what you always got, and try something different. Like good. My hat goes off for being, let's try this out for the concussions.
Yeah. Nothing changes if nothing changes, right? That's what Dan always says.
Mm-hmm.
No, I love that. And I love how you explain that. I think that's like why we came up with the deep life. It's always looking deeper into, where we can excel, and, the body keeps the score. Exactly like you're saying. So
even if you're disconnected, your body remembers. Those things are locked in there, and maybe it is back somewhere or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been such a tremendous conversation. Oh my God. I feel like we could talk for hours now. Anything else you want to
Another cup of coffee.
It's the perfect place to end it. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Jessie, where can people connect with you or find you on social media?
Easiest one, I tell everyone, just it's at Coach J Salas. That's SALAS. That's always the easiest for me. If you email me to Foundation Training, I usually I'm not the best with emails, but on there I'm generally like, oh, let me get back to you, or at least point you in the right direction. It's very easy for me because I try to like go on there, like I treat it like work. I go on there, I answer questions, and I'm off. Make a few posts, I'm off. So it's the easiest way to find me.
Awesome.
Great.
Well, we can't thank you enough for joining us on the Deep Life today, Jesse.
Yeah,
It's been
it's been
such
incredible.
an inspiration. Thank you again.
Yeah, thanks for sharing the morning with me. Have a great day, you guys.